With a Fox News alert, new fallout from a big Democratic victory in a closely watched governor's race. Democrat Ralph Northam beat Republican Ed Gillespie in the race for Virginia governor. Both sides giving their interpretations of the results, what the race could tell us about how voters are feeling as the midterm elections approach. This is Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner. Here today, Sandra Smith, Republican strategist and Fox News contributor Lisa Booth, the anchor of the Intelligence Report on Fox Business, Trish Regan, and today's #OneLuckyGuy, the editor-in-chief of the Weekly Standard, and Fox News contributor Steve Hayes. We say he is outnumbered. Awfully good to have him on a hump day sizzle.
I feel outnumbered.
Right?
I feel outnumbered.
Hump day sizzle to you, my friend.
Good. You know, I've got a scratchy voice because I was at the Packers game on Monday night. I yelled a lot. The Packers lost.
What was the weather
I'm from Chicago. I'm going to hold that one against you.
Wow.
But we got the Bears on Sunday.
It's Wednesday and you still don't have a voice?
Nah, I know. I was yelling a lot. Probably more than I should have.
Are you on the team?
Probably more than I should have. No, although I would have liked to have played Monday.
Oh, goodness. Let's get to the news.
Good.
Good to have you. It's been seen as the first major win for Democrats since President Trump was elected commander-in-chief. Democrat Ralph Northam, the lieutenant governor of Virginia, beat Republican Ed Gillespie in the state's gubernatorial race by a 9-point margin. Gillespie never campaigned with President Trump, but he did rally behind some of the president's signature issues. Today, President Trump said it wasn't enough. He tweeted this: Ed Gillespie worked harder, but did not embrace me or what I stand for. Don't forget, Republicans won 4 out of 4 House seats, and with the economy doing record numbers, we will continue to win even bigger than before! Steve, your thoughts?
It's a good try. It's a good try by President Trump. This was not a good night for Republicans. It was not a good night for Republicans in Virginia. It wasn't a good night for Republicans nationally. I think this was a 9-point margin was more than most people had thought. It was more than most polls suggested. Ed Gillespie tried to run on Trumpism without fully embracing Donald Trump.
Without Trump.
Right. And this was the way that, I think it was a way to sort of split the baby, as it were. And it didn't work. Look, you have people saying today that really what he needed to do was fully embrace Trump. It's not at all apparent that that was the answer.
Yeah, so that's interesting, because if you're going to do that kind of gymnastics move, it sort of means that you didn't commit to either situation. That's complicated. Lisa, do they learn from this, Republicans?
Well, I think if you're Ed Gillespie, he was looking at it in the fact that, Northern Virginia is a completely different part of the state than the southern part of the state. So,
sure.
And he had to be, turn out the vote in the southern part of the state, but still remain competitive in the northern part of the state. So I think that was his concern, to fully embrace President Trump. But look, I mean, Virginia has been a trending blue state. It would have been a surprise if Ed Gillespie had pulled off that state. And I think what it shows us is what we've already known, that Republicans who hold congressional seats that Hillary Clinton won, I think there's 23, are going to have a tough time in the midterm elections. There's going to be a lot of competitive races for Republicans. Virginia was a state that Hillary Clinton had won by 5 points.
So Trish, explain this to me, because I'm curious. There's 2 choices here that they had. I mean, you can pull the president on board, who already is endorsing you and giving you some heat, or not.
Right. In other words, you can't be middle of the road in this environment. And this is what he was trying to do. He had the Fairfax County voters that he needed to bring on board, while simultaneously bringing in Trump's base. And you can't really have it both ways. I mean, you look at Kelly Ayotte in New Hampshire, and she was running to regain her seat as senator there, and that didn't fly because she was also pulling a Gillespie, in that she was trying to have her cake and eat it too, and she wants the base while simultaneously not embracing everything that Donald Trump is about. And so I think that kind of wishy-washy stance is not working right now.
So what's the answer, though? I mean, the answer can't possibly be to embrace Trumpism and Donald Trump when you're talking about a president who's got 59% disapproval nationally.
Well,
and hire in some of these
I know,
states.
but that's if you entirely believe all those numbers. And I once again go back to the polls that told us over and over again that Donald Trump was not going to win the presidency.
I have
sure,
the answer.
But he was also running against Hillary
Lisa
Clinton.
said
I've got the answer for you. I mean, it's going to be congressional district specific on if candidates embrace President or Trump or not. Because as I mentioned, if you're running in a congressional district that Hillary Clinton won, you're probably going to keep a little distance from President Trump. We saw the same thing throughout President Obama's term as well. There are some candidates that embraced him and some that put him at the distance. But if you look at the Senate races, it's a little bit of a different story, because you actually have I think it's 10 Democrats running in states that President Trump won, running in, reddish states. So, I think that the way that House candidates run and Senate candidates can be a little bit different.
I was watching your show yesterday, and you had sound from Northam early in the day. You hear the candidates on the days when they go to vote for themselves. We hope that that's what they're doing. Virginia is difficult. You had Charlottesville in Virginia. You had diversity issues that came up on the campaign. And I saw some soundbite where Northam was talking about how inclusive he was. He drilled down on cultural issues, and I thought, as a Democrat, that seemed a little odd on a day of an election. Why not the economy, whatever? But it may have worked for him going into Northern Virginia, where you do have that very liberal vote.
He did not win without mistakes. There were certainly some mistakes made there as well. But,
definitely.
But when you look at Ed Gillespie and you wonder what are the lessons learned and how the GOP is going to look at this and change their strategy as we head into next year.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the big question. Look, there's no easy answer. I think Republicans are in a bind right now. You do have a president, even if you don't buy that he's at 59% disapproval or whatever, he's upside down. I mean, he's underwater right now. And you have a Republican Party that seems to be increasingly embracing that as a model for how to run Trump and Trumpism.
Are they, or are they embracing the ideas? I mean, the economy seems like it's working. So is that what they're embracing?
I don't know. I mean, I think if you look at Ed Gillespie, that's what he tried to do. He tried to have it both ways. He tried to embrace Trumpism, not fully embrace Donald Trump. And, it might work in some Hillary districts, but again, Hillary Clinton won Virginia by 5 points.
You need passion, though. You need passion, right? These voters, if you're going to get them to the booths.
Intensity.
Yeah,
gotta have it.
Otherwise, it's a rainy day. Why do they need to go out and vote in Virginia unless they really believe something? And that's what Donald Trump was able to tap into in 2016. The question is, can these midterm candidates do the same?
And the question is, how much does tax reform, if it gets done, how much that changes things as well? One of the key issues in the Virginia race was immigration. During the campaign, Ralph Northam was criticized for his position on sanctuary cities. And under pressure, he flip-flopped. He went from supporting sanctuary cities to opposing them. Progressives blasted him for changing his stance, and things got tense during his victory speech last night when protesters shouted "Sanctuary for all" while holding signs that said the same. Security taking no chances, whisking Northam off the stage for a short time. So, as I mentioned, he was not without his own perils in this campaign as well.
Yeah, he wasn't a great candidate, which I think also should give Republicans some pause as they look at this. He flipped on not only immigration and sanctuary cities, but he also flipped on Confederate monuments. Remember, he was going to lead the charge to take down Confederate monuments and ended up backing off of that position. And he won despite the fact that 59% of Virginians said that they want to keep Confederate monuments as they are. So he was pushing, on the one hand, he's pushing against sort of a cultural tide in Virginia in certain respects, but also able to tap in to Northern Virginia, the Virginia suburbs, and the anxieties that people had about Donald Trump up there.
What's so interesting is you're citing that Fox News polling that revealed that nearly 60% said keep them up when it came to the statues and the monuments, but that same polling said that was so low on the list of priorities for voters in this state. Top of it, Trish, as you can imagine, was the economy and healthcare. Immigration didn't even rate as high as that.
The economy matters. And if you're in Northern Virginia and you're getting all those fat government contracts, you want them to continue, right? And so if you have a Democrat in office, your shot at that is a little bit better than if you had a Republican. So I think that didn't serve him as well. They want the gravy train to continue, and that is how they make their money.
I mean, doesn't that come right back down to kind of what I've been pointing to, and is who's willing to lose something? Who's willing to cut something that's attached to dollars? And we talk about tax reform, but it comes into play there too. I don't see that list of spending.
Money talks, if that's what you're getting at. Well, at least I want to show one of those ads that Ed Gillespie put out there, going after Northam and his stance on sanctuary cities. Watch this.
MS-13 is a menace. Yet Ralph Northam voted in favor of sanctuary cities that let dangerous illegal immigrants back on the street, increasing the threat of MS-13. Ralph Northam's policies are dangerous.
Still wasn't enough.
It wasn't. I mean, I think in one sense that is a playbook for some Republicans. Emphasize the things that are, 80-20 issues like sanctuary cities. I mean, even people who have misgivings or aren't entirely on board with the president's immigration reform agenda, or at least the one that he ran on in 2016, can embrace sort of the skepticism that we've seen about sanctuary cities. And that's, I think, what Ed Gillespie tried to do there.
My biggest takeaway from watching what happened at his speech was the fact of showing the split within the Democratic Party. And this is going to come up even on issues like immigration when DACA comes up.
Nancy Pelosi,
in Congress.
they bum rushed her lectern.
Precisely. That was exactly one of the points I was going to make. What we saw with Nancy Pelosi, you had a progressive group pull out of Virginia and saying, we're not going to support Ralph Northam anymore. So this is a concern for the Democrat Party as well, of figuring out where are they going to be on some of these issues when you have the Bernie Sanders part of the base pulling you one direction, and then you have the Nancy Pelosi, Schumer, more establishment part of the base pulling you another direction.
Well, and the difference, too, I talked with Ronna McDaniel, who's the chairwoman for the RNC. I mean, they are flush with cash right now. They have an advantage that the DNC doesn't have right now. So in order for the DNC to approach some of those problems, they're going to have to spend some cash. She was telling me about how many door knocks they did in Virginia. It didn't deliver a win here, but who knows, in that particularly blue state, if it were not for that effort, if the gap between winning and losing wouldn't have even been bigger.
I don't think Democrats are looking at the results in Virginia and thinking that they've got a lot to be worried about, even if there are some divisions about
but they have
immigration.
Problems, and they're not raising money the way
they
that
do
they
have
could
problems.
Be right
I would
now.
argue, if you look at 2016, one of the things that Trump's election told us was that money doesn't matter as much as all the political know-it-alls think it does. I mean, the ads
But for
don't
Democrats,
matter
it
as
does,
much.
because that's their way of winning.
We'll see. Hillary Clinton had a lot more money and spent a lot more money than Donald Trump did and didn't win, couldn't overcome her problems.
Speaking of Democrats, facing new fallout over Hillary Clinton's alleged rigging of the 2016 primaries. Former DNC Chair Donna Brazile calling the Clinton campaign a cult. And current DNC Chair Tom Perez admitting the primary process was unfair. Plus, President Trump's new warning to North Korea as he pushes China to help crack down on the regime. Will it work? And what's next in this high-stakes showdown?
I speak not only for our countries, but for all civilized nations when I say to the North, do not underestimate us and do not try us.
President Trump arriving in China earlier today on day 6 of his tour of Asia. And in Beijing, the president and first lady were greeted by Chinese President Xi Jinping. A big focus of the president's visit, enlisting more Chinese help to rein in nuclear North Korea. Yesterday, in a speech to South Korea's National Assembly, the president warned North Korea not to test America's resolve, and that at the same time offering an olive branch.
North Korea is a country ruled as a cult. Today, I hope I speak not only for our countries, but for all civilized nations when I say to the North, do not underestimate us. Despite every crime you have committed against God and man, we will offer a path to a much better future. It begins with an end to the aggression of your regime, a stop to your development of ballistic missiles, and complete, verifiable, and total denuclearization.
Very straightforward. Is North Korea listening? Well, we don't know, but officials authorized to speak for the regime reportedly responded this way. We don't care about what that mad dog may utter because we've already heard enough. The United States is threatening us. We will counter those threats by bolstering the power of justice in order to take out the root cause of aggression in war. What does that mean?
It's the North Korean regime. We have no idea. It's a lot of bluster. I mean, this is what you've come to expect from them. Look, I think what Donald Trump said there was actually very important. He said that this has to begin with the denuclearization of North Korea.
Very direct.
Not end there. And that's a change from what we've seen in past administrations. And I think what the president is doing now is very sensitive diplomacy with China, where he's looking to encourage China to help the United States, not because we have the exact same interests in North Korea with respect to North Korea, which has been the working assumption of the three previous presidencies here in the United States, Democrats and Republicans. But he's encouraging China to help us because we're going to put pressure on them if they don't. And that's something new. It's about time that there's a new...
Tone?
Yeah.
right? It's a shift in tone. And Trish, I go to you because I know you study the numbers hard with what we can do with China. How does this help? What does this accomplish? Because this is a...
Yeah,
we do.
We have a lot of leverage, and you're right, previous administrations have not used it. I mean, China is stealing intellectual property to the tune of billions of dollars every year in complete violation of the WTO agreement. We haven't done a thing about it. Why? Because, oh, well, economically, China means so much to so many big companies and to our economy. But that's starting to change now because our safety, our nation's safety, the region's safety is now up in the air because of this madman in North Korea. So how do we influence this? We influence via China. Everyone I've spoken to in intelligence and in military operations has said to me, we don't have the ability, the capability to actually do anything meaningful in terms of regime change there or denuclearization. The only ones that can help are China.
You mean short of violence?
Right. Yes. And I don't want us to go to that. I mean, I think we need to think very strategically, economically, and also diplomatically with China in order to get China to influence the situation.
I guess my big question is always the timetable of this. I mean, is China going to move fast enough so that it remains an option for us to do all of these things that Trish is talking about? Because if they force our hand, we're in a different ballgame.
Yeah, and it makes it tough, too, knowing that what are our military options? The Pentagon has told us it's basically a full-out invasion, which would lead to the deaths of so many people, given the densely populated Seoul. So, obviously, with that hanging over our heads, that's very, very concerning and doesn't leave a lot of options from a military perspective. But to Steve and Trish's point, Tom Rogan wrote for the Washington Examiner that basically what he sees is President Trump trying this carrot and stick approach with China. We've seen some of the rhetoric from President Trump on this trip of we're going to work with China, we're going to see what China does, you know, basically enlisting China as a friend, while simultaneously before the trip, deploying the third nuclear aircraft carrier to the Western Pacific, calling on Japan to purchase U.S.
Different
weapons.
message.
Right. So also putting pressure to China, saying that, look, we're also, there's also this other option hanging over your head as well. So, to the President Trump's words that he likes to use, we'll see.
I mean, it's just as far as the rhetoric is concerned. I mean, that was a pretty fiery speech that he gave last night on North Korea. This is a president that's sending a very clear message to North Korea. Not a lot of people disagree with that.
No, and I think it's that kind of clarity is long overdue. What's been interesting to see is the response in South Korea, where you have the South Korean newspapers giving very favorable coverage to the president's trip there, with a South Korean president who's been willing to appease the North Koreans and to, I think, bend a knee towards China. We'll see if President Trump's rhetoric has the effect of stiffening the spine of the South Korean president, because it's gotten good reception with the populace over there.
Yeah. That's the importance of actually going, right? Because Moon is there among all the people in his region. Those are the people who are in his face, so to speak. If you get in his face, maybe you can change the conversation. All right, we'll move on. Not you personally. I meant the president. Don't get wild on me, Steve. Another shoe drops in the scandal over the Democrats' involvement in the Trump dossier. The meetings the Russian lawyer had with the people digging up dirt on the then candidate Trump before and after her meeting with Donald Trump Jr. The new questions this poses for Hillary Clinton. And the devil's always in the details. The nitty-gritty work on tax reform continues on the Hill. I was watching some of the markup by the House today. It was riveting. The Senate is due to make its own bill public tomorrow. What we can expect, and the surprise phone call the president made to a dozen Democrats. We'll talk about it.
Tax reform. President Trump calling a dozen Democratic senators to sell them on supporting the GOP bill as they huddled with two of his top aides. Trump telling them that, quote, rich people get hurt in this bill. This as Senate Republicans are set to release the first details of their tax plan tomorrow, a plan that could differ starkly from the House bill. The Washington Post reporting that Senate leaders may delay the big tax cut for corporations. One of those Democrats on the call, Chris Coons, says his party wants to work with Republicans.
We want to work across the aisle to strengthen the middle class, to support manufacturing, to make our country more competitive. And the folks on the other side of the table, including the president calling information, said, just wait, you're going to see a different tax bill in the Senate than the House. We're at the beginning of a process, not at the end.
And earlier on America's Newsroom, I asked the number 3 in Senate leadership, Republican John Thune, if the president was playing both sides.
I think the president, again, wants a bill that he can sign into law that helps middle-income families. I still believe that in the end, Sandra, there are going to be Democrats who, when they see the features of this bill and realize the positive impact, the benefits that it delivers to middle-income families, are going to be available to vote for it. And I think the president's trying to make the effort, and I appreciate him doing that.
So first things first, we're going to get the rollout of the big Senate GOP plan tomorrow, and we're left wondering, what's in that?
Right. Well, I think there's a lot to be learned. The devil's here. I mean, the devil really is here in the details.
Well, he's getting a workout.
I think it's going to be, you know, it's encouraging, I think, from the perspective of Republicans to see the president picking up the phone from Asia, making these calls. There's nothing at all wrong with the president calling Democrats. I think it'd be helpful for Republicans if they could get some Democrat support for this bill. I'm not sure that the message that the president used, that this will hurt rich people, is consistent with what a lot of Republicans think. I mean, that might make it's like when he said that the health care bill was mean. Republicans, he's got to shore up Republicans first, and arguing that this is a punitive bill, punishing success, punishing rich people.
Yeah, interesting move to call in and talk to those 12 or so senators that Gary Cohn was meeting with yesterday. But Trish, that corporate tax rate, I mean, that's the centerpiece of this. And I pressed Senator Thune on that because there's a Washington Post report today that I just cited saying the tax bill could delay corporate tax, the corporate tax cut. I pressed him on that. Here's what he said.
We're still finalizing the details of our bill. We'll roll that out tomorrow, and you all get a chance to look at it. But the one thing that it will do is it's going to reduce business tax rates, and we think that's critical. We're not competitive in the global economy. We're continuing to hemorrhage jobs in companies overseas that are taking profits over there and creating jobs there instead of creating jobs here. And so getting the rate down will help raise wages for American workers. And again, that's something that's good for our economy and good for American families.
We're left wondering if the Senate plan is going to look drastically different than what we were seeing in the House.
It could, but this is just a bad idea. I mean, if you're going to cut taxes, do it right away so everybody can get the benefit of it. If you're trying to help the economy by lowering corporate taxes, do it. Don't wait a year, which is what they're talking about, because they think they'll save $100 billion. Guess what? I get an idea for them on how they can save $100 billion. How they can make even more, because I know that this is important to you. Something that they have let just go by the wayside. Our president, when he was campaigning, said over and over and over again how much we needed to close the loophole for private equity investors. Basically, and it's a little bit complicated, but if you gave me $100 to invest, and I was investing it for you, Harris, I would then say, okay, well, your $100, it turned into $1,000. So I'm going to take 20% of that. Mm-hmm. Well, that 20%, that should be my income, right? That's what I'm getting paid.
I get it.
But they are treating it as capital gain, so they're getting a free pass. Now, if it's your own money you're investing, fine. Yes, tax it. That's how they can fix this.
Let's keep talking money here, because this is just crossed. And I know some people throw out the CBO score with, you know, the trash. But it matters in terms, as I understand it, of budget reconciliation, which is what the House what everybody agreed on, right? And that allows them to have majority vote in the Senate. So the CBO analysis just found that this bill would push it up to $1.7 trillion in debt. Yes, the bill cuts revenues by $1.4 trillion, which falls within the level Republicans allowed themselves in their budget resolution. But the additional cost of debt servicing would mean that the overall debt would increase by $1.7 trillion. That means what in terms of majority versus needing 60 votes?
Well, I think it makes it a lot harder to sell it, frankly. And the other part that, you know, is not getting much attention right now in the context of a $20.3 trillion national debt is the absence of entitlement reform as any part of this debate. Everybody understands that entitlements are what's driving the national debt. Right. And Republicans, who were the party of reforming entitlements for 6 years, have just given that up. There's no discussion of that. I think a discussion of that could have helped them at least fight on that front as it relates to debt.
Last word.
I think there's three big concerns for Republicans. I'll be quick. Deficit, you've got the SALT deductions that are still a concern for many New Jersey, New York, and California members, as evidenced by Darrell Issa saying that he can't support the House bill. Third thing is small business and pass-through income, how that's being treated. You have groups like the NFIB, National Federation of Independent Business, coming out against it. I think those are the three big issues that are going to cause Republicans trouble.
If this score is even close to being right, they got bigger issues because they're going to need Democrats.
Well, all right. New questions for Hillary Clinton's campaign amid reports that may give special counsel Robert Mueller's Russia investigation new reason to look into the man who was paid by Hillary Clinton and the DNC to dig up dirt on Donald Trump. Plus, a powerful Democratic lawmaker claiming political motivation in a Republican investigation into that controversial Russian uranium deal. He wants access to their confidential informant. The deal happened under Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's watch, just as Bill Clinton was getting cut a big check from a Kremlin-controlled bank. Tangled webs.
New questions for Hillary Clinton's campaign as a stunning report points to possible ties between the Clinton team and Russia. It centers around a suspected Russian operative in her controversial Trump Tower meeting with Donald Trump Jr. in June 2016. Before and after that meeting, she was reportedly meeting with the co-founder of the research firm Fusion GPS, the same firm the Clinton campaign and the DNC and maybe even the FBI paid to dig up dirt or to deal with the dirt being dug up on then-candidate Trump. Fusion GPS would go on to hire the British spy responsible for the unverified Trump dossier. Is the switch about to be flipped and then point to the Hillary Clinton division, if you will, politically?
No, I don't think it's about to be flipped. I think there are questions on both sides of this. I mean, you've seen, if you look at the revisions to stories that we've had from people in Trump world broadly over the past several days, Carter Page, Corey Lewandowski, Jeff Sessions have all had to change their stories or amend the stories that they had given earlier. So there's additional scrutiny and additional questions for them to answer. And I think they're difficult questions. Having said that, there are some serious questions about what the DNC was up to with respect to Fusion GPS. I mean, was this some kind of a setup job? And Donald Trump Jr. shouldn't have taken the meetings. We all looked at the emails. You know, they certainly were too eager, in my view, to want to work with Republicans. This isn't evidence of collusion, but it's evidence of a willingness to collude. The question is, what hand did the DNC have in this? And what was the founder of Fusion GPS reporting back after or asking her after the meeting?
An interesting chapter missing in Donna Brazil's book. She has plenty of dirt on the DNC, but that element of it, a very serious one, is one we have so many questions about. Lisa?
Yeah, I mean, I think we keep having new questions arise regarding Fusion GPS, the role that they played, as well as the Hillary Clinton herself. And we also know that the first dossier, I think, was released, it was 11 days after this meeting took place. And so the question is, you know, was this a setup? What did Fusion GPS know about that meeting that took place? In the dossier, there was mention of the fact of the Trump campaign getting information from Kremlin sources. Now we know that the Hillary Clinton campaign was getting information from Kremlin sources, because we know that some of the sources of the information for the dossier came from Kremlin sources that were paid. So there's a lot of questions.
So, Sandra, one thing that you and I talk about a lot is accountability. And even if
and lack thereof.
And lack thereof. Yes, completely vanishing of accountability. And just this whole idea of we're putting all of this now, fresh attention on this with new details and new evidence coming out. The big question is, where does it get us?
Where does it get us? And it brings you to what you're hearing a lot of the response from the left, Stephen Hayes, is she's not president. And
Yeah.
that's really the response we hear a lot, right, in the media as well.
Yeah, but you can't have an erosion of the rule of law by not going after, by not investigating these serious questions. I think there are serious questions. Now, are some people on the Republican side or some Trump supporters using this as a distraction from the Trump Russia investigation? I think that's apparent. That's happening all the time. But it doesn't mean that those questions about what Fusion GPS was up to shouldn't be answered. The good news, I think, is that it appears that Robert Mueller is looking into this. I mean, we've had questions about Tony Podesta.
Do we know that for certain?
Well, I think there are indications that he's been looking into Tony Podesta and his activities, who was funding some of this stuff. And I hope he continues to pursue it.
You know, Trish, I just look at this and how long we've been talking about this, and now finally we see that, no, it's not all about these guys, it's about these guys too.
Yeah, it's been flipped on its head. I mean, I think there were a lot of questions about Hillary Clinton and Russia going back some time. I mean, we certainly did a lot of reporting on the quite obvious conflicts of interest between the Clinton Foundation and the Russians, and the approval of that Uranium One deal, which was just bizarre, especially given that there was an FBI investigation that Mueller was doing going into whether or not Vladimir Putin was trying to have an outsized influence in the atomic energy industry here in the U.S.
And
by the way, Holder was on the CFIUS committee.
And let's get to that here.
The deal.
Trish, I actually want to get that here in this segment. So the top Democrat on the Oversight Committee sending a letter to Chairman Trey Gowdy yesterday questioning the motives behind a new Republican-launched investigation into the Obama-era Russian Uranium One deal, a deal that allegedly benefited the Clintons. Cummings writing, quote, "These actions raise serious concerns or serious questions about whether Republicans are reopening this investigation of Hillary Clinton to try to distract public attention from the ongoing criminal probe into President Trump's campaign and its ties to Russia." Cummings also saying in the letter that Democrats want access to a, quote, confidential informant that some Republicans say will provide new evidence about the 2010 Uranium One deal. So, Trish, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but
no problem.
Adding some of these different elements to that discussion, what's your take on what I just read?
Look, I think we should get to the bottom of this. A lot of deals don't make it through CFIUS. 3 recently have been turned down, but many just go by the wayside. They get pulled because it's very complicated stuff to get a deal through like this. I mean, you have a uranium company. By the way, it was ARMZ Holdings, Uranium Holdings. That was the name of the company that was trying to do this buy of our uranium resources. And that's held by the Russian Atomic State Energy Corporation. I mean, if you're not going ding, 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 if you're on the CFIUS committee, I don't know what would actually cause you. So you're either talking about total incompetence when it comes to this crew, or possibly something more nefarious.
Well, and that's why you have people like Representative Peter King, and not just people like, specifically him, coming forth and writing letters very early on, trying to get the information that was there that led to the decision-making by those 9 agencies. You know, it isn't just that they took a hand-on-hand vote. They had to have studied some things. And I mean, so what was the paper trail like, rather? And that's what King wants to get after.
Well, and I think it's important to get to have some additional transparency into how that decision-making process actually took place. Representative Cummings here, I think, hurts his own case because he's made this charge of somebody like Trey Gowdy so many times. I mean, we saw him do it throughout the Benghazi investigation. Everything is Republicans on some political witch hunt. You know, that's not the case. I think if Trey Gowdy, of all people, thinks that this merits deeper investigation, it probably merits deeper investigation.
And to that point, Steve, what's at the crux of this for you? If you were Trey Gowdy, what are the answers that you want to know surrounding the uranium deal as well as the Russian bribery?
You want to hear from the FBI informant?
You want to hear from the FBI? The overriding question, I mean, there's one simple question. Was there a quid pro quo? That's the question. The real question, I think, starts with, was there a quid? Was this improper? Did CFIUS approve this in a way that was inconsistent with the way that these things are normally approved? And if that was the case, can it be tied to these donations, these back-end donations to the Clinton?
And specifically at one of the 9 agencies, which was state.
And why were the shortcuts taken? Why did this deal go through so quickly? I mean, again, just the names of the companies should have caused people to pause for a minute and say, we need to investigate this more deeply.
Some did, by the way. There were red flags.
And then you get to, was there a quid pro quo? I mean, $146 million going to the Clinton Foundation from Russians, $500,000 in a speaking fee going to Bill Clinton. It just doesn't look right.
And
I don't know why we allowed any of that.
But this is really important. You're right. I mean, it sounds bad. When you look at that, it sounds really bad. If you're going to do something about it, you have to be able to say, this led to this, led to this, led to this. It's not enough to just say, well, gosh, this looks bad. We know why they were doing this. You can't know it. You have to actually be able to prove it.
I just wonder why there was such a change in our policy towards Russia at the time. Remember, you know, Mitt Romney getting made fun of and Barack Obama saying, hey, take your 1980s foreign policy back. There was a definite change in our policy to Russia, and it happened at the same time as Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton came into state and he became president. And then all of this transpired. I just wonder why. Why was Russia first our enemy?
Russia's sitting back going, wow, I'm in every conversation. I'm in every investigation.
I'm willing to believe that the Obama administration came up with really stupid policies without having been paid to do it. But it's worth actually looking into this question. I mean, Barack Obama was trying to make friends out of enemies everywhere around the world in a sort of preemptive way. But there are some real questions here that deserve answering.
Well, I think Putin's riding off into the sunset, shirtless, you know, chugging vodka, watching America unravel here. But on to different topics. DNC Chair Tom Perez now admitting that Democrats are facing a trust gap. amid renewed allegations that the 2016 primaries were stacked against Bernie Sanders. Meantime, the person who started it all now calling Hillary Clinton's campaign a cult and more. Stay tuned.
Okay, let's say it wasn't rigged.
It was cancerous.
This agreement put in place by the Clinton campaign was a cancer.
It stopped me from doing my job as chair.
More Outnumbered in just a moment. But first, we touch base with Harris and what's coming up in Outnumbered Overtime in just a few moments. Hey, Harris.
Thanks a lot. We're going to talk about the president and the fact that after his latest warning to North Korea, President Trump is now next door in Beijing. Can he get China? Can he get Russia on board to help keep the rogue regime in check? I'll talk with UN Ambassador John Bolton. And they cried. They gorged on childhood comfort foods. Members of the mainstream media recalling how devastated they were by President Trump's stunning victory 1 year ago tonight. Does this show just how out of touch some of them are? OT, top of the hour. Sandra?
All right. We'll look forward to it. Thank you.
Former DNC Chair Donna Brazile today again suggesting Democrats stacked the deck against Bernie Sanders and other candidates in 2016. Brazile recently revealed that Hillary Clinton's campaign made a deal to effectively take control of the DNC before voters made their pick. Watch.
By beginning the general election process before a nominee is chosen, I found that unacceptable, and in the book I use the word unethical. So whether you're Martin O'Malley, Bernie Sanders, Lincoln Chafee, or Jim Webb, that's not fair.
Meanwhile, current DNC Chair Tom Perez appearing to finally admit the 2016 primary was not fair and that the party is facing a crisis of confidence. Listen to him here.
The DNC didn't put its best foot forward in 2016, and because of that, we have trust gaps. I know we have more work to do, making sure that the 2020 election cycle is fair for everybody. Yeah. We fell short on that in 2016.
DNC Vice Chair Keith Ellison also echoing those remarks. Meanwhile, businessman and major Democratic donor Stephen Klubeck expressing his frustration over the party moving away from a more centrist agenda. Watch.
If we go far left, I'm out. I'm out. We need middle ground, and hopefully we'll get our together.
And according to a new poll, favorable views of the Democratic Party dropping to their lowest mark in more than 25 years at only 37%. Are these guys in trouble, Stephen?
Well, I mean, on the one hand, they're clearly in trouble because you're seeing all this inner turmoil. I mean, I don't know where Donna Brazile is today with respect to the claim of rigging versus not rigging. She seems to have changed her story a few times. But it's fascinating that you have Tom Perez and Keith Ellison and others saying basically, yeah, we weren't fair to the other candidates. We did give a leg up to Hillary Clinton. I think that's a problem for Democrats, both in terms of actual mechanisms, how do they pick their nominee, but especially in terms of perception. You can't let people think that this is that you don't know how to run your own party. You can't be fair to these other candidates. Having said all that, Democrats' popularity is lowest it's been in a long time. So is Republicans. So if you look at the generic congressional ballot, right now, Democrats have a significant advantage in the congressional ballot over Republicans. So Democrats aren't in great shape. Republicans are arguably in worse.
Go ahead.
But part of the problem, right, is that we're sitting here, we're talking about the past when it comes to Democrats, right? There's no looking forward into the future. We're talking almost every day, it feels like, right, Lisa, that what is their message? What is their strategy heading into next year? And so with Democrats right now, and particularly with Donna Brazile, she'll be on Fox News tonight talking, it's a whole lot of looking back at all their mistakes and problems that they've had in the past.
Well, and I think the Democratic Party is trying to figure out who they are. I mean, the Republican Party is as well, but you know, you've got the progressive wing of the party who think that even people like Cory Booker aren't progressive enough, right? So, I mean, that's a real problem for them. We've seen that on issues like abortion, basically Tom Perez trying to do a litmus test on the issue of abortion. We've also seen issues like single payer coming up, dividing the party as well. So I think there's a real split on that issue for the party. And then the second, Stanley Greenberg in the New Yorker, he was a former pollster for President Clinton, who expressed concerns that the Democrat Party doesn't know if they want to focus on identity or working class voters and the economy. And so I think that's a real struggle for them as well in trying to figure out which way they're going to go. We know the answer,
what the answer should be to that one,
Well,
right?
It should be the economy. The problem is when they talk about the economy, they talk about tax and spend and redistribution of wealth. And so, you know, there's that Bernie Sanders arm of the party, Elizabeth Warren, that really is just a bunch of socialists. And I think if they go down that path, they're going to have a very, very hard time. And
well,
so
I hope that you're right, that there's not a lot of currency for socialist ideas in this country. I'm not convinced that that's the case. I think the center of gravity right now is, and the Democratic Party is very clearly on the left of the party, people like Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, and others. And my concern is that as the party continues to drag people from the center, that's where the Democratic Party is going to end up.
Well, if it does, I don't think they're going to get anywhere, because Americans, at the end of the day, all want an opportunity for prosperity, right? I mean, it's intrinsic to who we are. We're not socialists. We're not France. At least not yet.
I hope you're right. I hope you're right.
You know, as Sandra mentioned, make sure you tune in tonight to FNC. Our very own Tucker Carlson sat down with Donna Brazile, and we could hear some more bombshells on how the Democratic primaries went down. That's tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern. More Outnumbered in just a moment.